Yellow heart. The rain had been falling since early morning, the kind that soaked through shoes and seeped into bones. People rushed past the small roadside hotel, collars up, eyes down, each wrapped in their own world. Inside the lobby, the heater hummed softly. Mark stood behind the front desk, flipping through reservation papers while sipping lukewarm coffee. He had been the manager here for almost 8 years. He'd seen everything: angry guests, broken marriages, desperate travelers, late-night police visits. Very little surprised him anymore. That's why he barely looked up when the glass doors opened. He heard soft footsteps first, then a small voice. "Mommy, I'm cold." Mark glanced up out of habit. A woman stood just inside the entrance, rain dripping from her coat. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, strands sticking to her cheeks. In one hand she held a worn purse. With the other, she gently pulled a little girl closer to her side. The child looked about 6, pink sneakers soaked through, a thin sweater, big tired eyes. Mark straightened. "Good afternoon," he said professionally. "Do you have a reservation?" The woman hesitated. "No," she said quietly. "I was hopping, maybe you had a room." Mark checked the screen. Only 2 rooms left, both already marked as pending arrivals. "I'm sorry," he said automatically. "We're almost full tonight." Her shoulders sank just a little. "Oh," she whispered. She bit her lip, clearly debating whether to say more. The little girl tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy." The woman crouched to her level. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let me talk to the nice man." She stood again, eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. "Sir," she said, voice trembling, "please don't throw us out. I know it's late and I don't have much money, but we just need one night, just tonight." Mark felt that familiar tightening in his chest. He'd heard versions of this before. He sighed softly. "Ma'am, it's not that I don't want to help, it's just—" Then she lifted her face fully into the light. And Mark froze. The room seemed to tilt. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and spilled across the counter. She stared back at him, equally shocked. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Her lips parted. "Mark." His heart began to pound. "Sarah." He hadn't said her name in nearly 7 years. The little girl looked between them, confused. "Mommy, who's that?" Sarah swallowed hard. That's someone Mommy used to know." Mark stepped out from behind the desk slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. "I thought you moved," he said. "I heard you went overseas." Sarah gave a small, sad laugh. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan." They stood there awkwardly, memories crashing between them. College days, late-night coffees, dreams they once shared. Finally, Mark cleared his throat. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you both warm." He grabbed 2 towels and guided them toward the small seating area near the heater. The little girl wrapped herself in one towel, while Sarah held the other around her shoulders. "What happened?" Mark asked gently. Sarah stared at the floor. After a long pause, she spoke. "I got married," she said. "Moved to another city. Things were good for a while, then they were." She didn't go into details, but Mark didn't need them spelled out. "And now?" Sarah exhaled slowly. "Now I'm back in town. I had a little money saved, but it went fast. The shelter is full. I called everyone I could think of." She looked up at him. "I didn't know where else to go." Mark glanced at the computer screen behind the desk. Both rooms were still marked pending. He thought about hotel policy, about corporate rules, about the paperwork he'd have to fill out. Then he looked at the little girl, rubbing her hands together for warmth. He stood. "Wait here." He walked back behind the desk and picked up the phone. One of the pending reservations canceled. Then, incredibly, the second one did too. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. Sometimes life gives you a second chance. He printed a room key. Walking back over, he handed it to Sarah. "Room 214, he said. 2 beds, hot shower, breakfast in the morning." Sarah stared at the key like it might vanish. "Mark, I can't." "You can," he interrupted softly. "Just take it." Her eyes filled. "Thank you," she whispered. The little girl smiled shyly at him. "Thank you, mister." Mark forced a smile back. "You're welcome, kiddo." They headed toward the elevator, and Mark watched until the doors closed. Only then did he sit down heavily in his chair. The past had just walked back into his life. And somehow, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. Sarah barely slept that night. She lay awake listening to her daughter's soft breathing, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in her mind. Of all the places to end up. Of all the people. Mark. He had been kind back then, quiet, reliable, the one person who always showed up when everyone else disappeared. She hadn't wanted him to see her like this. But maybe fate didn't care what she wanted. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the curtains. They showered, changed into dry clothes, and went downstairs for breakfast. Mark was already there, pouring coffee for guests. When he saw them, he gave a small nod. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," Sarah admitted. He crouched in front of the little girl. "What's your name?" "Emily." "Well, Emily," he said warmly, "we've got pancakes today." Emily's eyes lit up. "Really?" He laughed. "Really?" Sarah watched the interaction quietly. Later, while Emily ate, Mark and Sarah sat at a small corner table. "So," Mark said, stirring his coffee, "what's the plan?" Sarah hesitated. "I don't really have one." Mark studied her face. She looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. "You can stay another night," he said. "I'll make it work." Sarah shook her head immediately. "No, Mark, I don't want to be a burden." He met her gaze. "You're not." There was silence between them, thick with unspoken history. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I left because I thought I needed more. More excitement, more ambition. I thought love was supposed to feel dramatic." Mark smiled sadly. "Turns out quiet loyalty matters more." She nodded. "My husband left when things got hard. I tried to make it work. I really did." Mark believed her. He always had. That afternoon, Mark helped her fill out job applications on the lobby computer while Emily colored nearby. He made a few calls. A friend who managed a daycare. Another who owned a small cafe. Doors began to open. Not wide, but enough. That evening, Mark brought up an extra blanket to their room. Sarah stood in the doorway, unsure. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. Mark thought for a moment. "Because once, a long time ago, you helped me when I had nothing." She frowned. "I don't remember that." He smiled softly. "You paid for my groceries when my card declined. You pretended it was no big deal." Her eyes widened. "Oh, yeah." She swallowed. "Thank you," she said again, quieter this time. 2 weeks later, Sarah had a job at the cafe. Emily started daycare. They moved into a small studio apartment 3 blocks from the hotel. Mark helped carry boxes. He fixed a broken cabinet. He taught Emily how to tie her shoes properly. One evening, as they sat on the apartment floor eating takeout, Emily looked up from her noodles. "Mommy." "Yes, sweetheart." "Is Mark gonna be part of our family?" Sarah nearly choked. Mark froze mid-bite. They looked at each other. Sarah brushed Emily's hair back gently. "Why do you ask?" Emily shrugged. "He makes you smile." Mark cleared his throat. Sarah felt warmth rise in her chest. After Emily went to bed, Sarah and Mark stood on the small balcony, city lights blinking below. "I never meant to disappear," Sarah said quietly. "I just didn't know how to come back." Mark leaned against the railing. "Life breaks people sometimes." She turned to him. "And sometimes it puts them back together." He met her eyes. "Sometimes." They didn't rush anything. They took walks, shared coffee, talked about fears and regrets and hopes. Slowly, carefully, something new began to grow, not built on fantasy, but on understanding. One night, months later, Sarah held Mark's hand and whispered, "Thank you for not turning us away." He squeezed her fingers. "You didn't knock on my door by accident." Emily ran toward them, laughing. Mark lifted her into his arms. Sarah watched, heart full. The night she begged, "Please don't throw us out," she thought she was asking for a room. She didn't realize she was stepping back into a life that was waiting for her. Sometimes the people who see us at our worst are the ones who love us best. And sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning.